Good morning, Misfits. My name is Bren Lopez. I am the manager of Indie Bookstore Children's Book World in Los Angeles, where we make it our mission to have every child see themselves on our bookshelves, but also see each other. I get so excited when I get to introduce a new book series to my middle grade readers, which can span anywhere from about second and third grade, start reading the chapter books up to, junior high school. And they love their series. They want to read them in order. They want to reread them. And this is a new series that I am absolutely loving. And I just know that kids are going to get so excited about it. It is The Misfits, a Royal Conundrum by Lisa Yee with illustrations by Dan Santat. This is like a superstar collaboration, like the Avengers or something like that. Or we'll do DC, like Batman and Wonder Woman. We'll do DC for you, Lisa. So I don't want to step in on that. Real quick, these are two of our children's book world, our favorite people in the world, creators in the world. Lisa Yee is a Newbery honoree, National Book Award finalist, Judy Lopez Award winner, Asian American Pacific Literature Award for Best Book for Maisie Chen's Last Chance. She's written over 21 books for young people, many other books actually, just beyond that, the 21. And the groundbreaking Millicent Man Girl Genius, Stanford Wong Flunk's Big Time. I mentioned DC because you also wrote books for the DC Supergirl series, right?
Yes.
And now we have this is sort of like different from what you've been doing more recently. And I'm so excited by it. How are you doing this morning, Lisa?
I'm awake. So that's all that matters. No, I'm doing really well. Thank you.
We're excited to talk to you about this. Dan Santat. Dan, you've had a really sort of exciting year, right?
Yeah, no. 2023 is going to be a tough one to top.
Yeah, Dan is the #1 New York Times bestselling author and illustrator of over 100 books. If I don't see a new Dan Santat book coming out within a few months, I'm worried about you. I want to do a wellness check. His picture book, The Adventures of Beagle, which I'm sure many of the kids out there have read and fell in love with, An Imaginary Friend, received the Caldecott Medal. And his graphic novel, A First Time for Everything, received the National Book Award. That is a really personal book too, right, Dan?
Yeah, it's a memoir about my life when I was 13 years old, traveling to Europe for the first time, and learning to appreciate everything around me as well as myself.
Yeah, I feel like I read a lot of books when I was a kid, but then when I hit 13, it's those books that I read when I was 13 that some were sort of like have stayed with me, like in my heart and soul for the longest period of time. And I can completely see your story being one of those stories that touches people.
So, I mean, like it's funny because I remember one of the first books I read at that age, where the teacher openly was just like, pick a book in the bookshelf. And I remember clearly for me, that book was The Outsiders.
Oh, that's so good. Yes.
Yeah. Like that was like the first book I loved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Golden.
Did you have one, Lisa?
Well, I was actually younger. Honestly, Katie John was a book I read when I was 9 years old, and I love that series by Mary Calhoun, and I realized that I wanted to be a writer, and that if I ever had a daughter, her name was going to be Katie. And I have a daughter named Katie. Kate, but that book really inspired me. It was a misunderstood tomboy.
Yeah, mine was Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls.
Yeah,
which like the stakes were so high for this young person, and they were willing to spend 2 years to be able to get enough money just to be able to purchase one, a puppy. And so that journey was like, there was just so much at stake. And I remember being deeply moved by all of that. So, but books are special, and I love. Go ahead, Dan. You were going to say something.
No, I was just thinking. Well, first of all, The Outsiders. I wanted to name our first son Pony Boy, but my wife objected. But with where the red fern grows, like one of the scenes that really vividly stuck in my mind was when he had the hand axe and he was trying to cut the tree down with the hand axe, And I did so much yard work as a kid. Like, it was so clear in my mind of like, oh man, like, did he even bring gloves? Like, yeah, it was just, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That really rings in my head.
So, Lisa, tell us about the Misfits.
Okay, I happen to have a copy
like Godzilla.
The Misfits is a new novel series written by me and illustrated by Dan, and the illustrations are amazing. It's about 5 super awkward kids who end up on this island in the Bay of San Francisco. It's kind of like Alcatraz. And mainly it starts with Olive, and she doesn't know what's happening. She feels that she's abandoned by her family, and she's sent to this school. And it's full of mystery and intrigue, and the 5 misfits end up being together in as a team of knack. No one can know. So they're secret operatives, and they fight crime. And it's very twisty, it's very funny, and they have to solve the crime of the century. And if they don't, their school is going to go under, chaos will reign, and it's about their journey to stop the crime and get to know each other.
Yeah, it's really fun. I love all of the different characters and the setup. I want to ask you about where it all started. So for this particular story, because I think sometimes kids don't understand, everybody, not just kids, don't understand that frequently when there is an author and an illustrator working together, particularly for picture books, they never actually meet each other. That is very rare that they actually even know each other. But in this instance, you have both been friends for a very long time. Good friends. Mm-hmm. Food friends, the best kind of friends.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I'm curious, Lisa, did you write this book with the publisher and then decided you wanted to start illustrations, or had you already talked separately about let's do this together?
No, it started out actually 2 words, ballerina battalion. And originally, I wanted to write a book about these crime-fighting ballerinas because, you know, they could really kick well and they could fly and they could do that. But then it started to morph into 5 kids who had different skills. And so as I started writing it, at first I didn't know that Dan was going to illustrate. And then when I found out he was, we didn't actually talk about the book a lot because we didn't have to. Because I know what he can do. I know his abilities. Mm-hmm. And so like I would be writing and I would be thinking, Dan's going to have a lot of fun with this scene and Dan's going to like this. And it actually helped my writing because I could picture what he was going to do with it.
Yeah. Were you excited when they offered you Lisa's book to illustrate?
I mean, you know,
you worked before.
So that's the thing. It's like what I find extraordinary is the journey that she and I both took throughout our careers. We met in 2002 at an SCBWI conference before either of us were published. And what I really value about our friendship was that, you know, it was from the very beginning. And here we are 20 years later. Yeah, I think it's been 20 years later. And I'm now in the company of somebody. I mean, we both won some awards, right? We both made a name for ourselves in this business. And the first time we worked together was, you know, a series for Scholastic, Bobby versus Girls, and that was a fun experience. And so here we are, I don't know how to say it, much more mature and more knowledgeable about our skill sets. There is a confidence that has arisen in our abilities, right? And so, you know, I think early on we were trying to prove ourselves and really try to establish ourselves. And now we're both at a point where, you know, I think we can comfortably say that we're firmly established in this business, and we get to do something that we truly believe in. And I think our input into the story and we're just more comfortable with ourselves as writers and artists. And so it's really nice to kind of revisit and work together with somebody that, you know, I've known for years, you know, and it's just this really, I mean, you want to talk about the year I had. The year before that, like Lisa had this amazing year as well, where she was just celebrated under the sun, and it's been wonderful, and so it's great to reconnect with all our accolades and just kind of see where we are now and see how we've both grown.
Well, I was thinking about this, and we were talking about school visits earlier, and I remember like the first school visit that I did, Dan came with me because he had never seen a school visit.
Oh my God, I remember that. Yeah.
And I was doing one, and so Dan's like, I think you even took off of work or something, Dan, because Dan was working full time.
Right.
And so, I believe it was in Arcadia. And
it was in Arcadia. It was through Scholastic Book Fairs. Yeah.
And Dan was there, and that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, we went out for a burger afterwards at Fuddruckers. I remember all that.
Right, we did.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you have your own, memory and languages to be able to communicate with each other in the process of the collab, but you're also still doing it sort of separate. I mean, you have trust in each other, which makes it easy maybe for Dan, when you read Lisa's text that you're going to illustrate, to know perhaps what will excite Lisa when she sees that illustration. You'll be like, oh, if I do this, she's going to get super excited by that. And vice versa. You have trust, Lisa, that Dan is going to know exactly the right things, or he might surprise you in a way that's going to be really special.
Yeah, I was just like, and I would see sketches, and I was just blown away because he took the words to another level by melding the illustrations with it, and I was just so thrilled to see these characters come to life. It was amazing.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of illustration, and I like to talk about illustration in two different ways. And Dan, I think you're the prime exemplar of the kind of illustrator that's the second way. The first is where you are literally just illustrating the text, and the illustrations basically mirror what's going on inside the text.
Right. Yeah.
Then there's the illustrator who continues the story in the illustrations. Yeah. There is more of the story, and if you look at that illustration, all of a sudden other parts of the story that may not be in the text come alive within the illustrations. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think it's important to give more than what is received in the text, like you do want to participate in the storytelling, and I think what ends up happening, even something as subtle as the clothes they wear, that says a lot about a character, right? And so in Lisa's description of Olive, she was wearing vintage clothing, and I said, oh, maybe she's someone who's really into old, like, band shirts and things like that. So I have her wearing, shirts from old bands that I grew up with, and I think there's someone on social media had made a comment, said, "Is that a Bad Religion?" I'm like, yes, it is, right? Yeah. And so those are like little shout outs to the older community, the teachers and librarians who probably know who that is. I mean, I'm always someone who likes to give little snippets to everyone, not just the kids. Like, I do like to do little representations that the older audience can say, like, oh, this is someone who grew up like near Orange County, was a fan of No Doubt and things like that, who now consider bands like No Doubt vintage or old, So it's fun. And so it's also important to look at contemporary fashion styles in the cultural zeitgeist and try to be current. It's funny, like, you'll look at old book covers where it's like girls wearing suspenders and overalls and like having pigtails and things like that. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. I need to go through like Urban Outfitters or like Old Navy catalog and figure out how kids are dressing these days, but then also mix it up to match their voices. And so there's so many different personalities of all these characters, and I really got to just flex different kind of personalities into the artwork, and like little mannerisms here and there, I made one of the characters particularly like more nervous when they're in a stressful situation, and you kind of see it in their body language and things like that. So it's just a little nod to the description of the character, but you're just adding a little bit more just for the fun. Because I mean, it's boring if you're just showing what's being told.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
like if someone were to write about a delicious apple, it's like, well, what kind of an apple? And it gives me the freedom to say, oh, it's a jazz apple, it's a Honeycrisp apple, like that. Like that's the contributions that I get to give.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of action in the book, a lot of action,
which I love.
And it's Dan's illustrations take it off the page. Because you can see them. None of the illustrations are the kids just sitting there. Something is always happening.
Yeah.
It's a very chaotic book. It's controlled chaos, but it's very chaotic with things always going on, and it moves very quickly. So the melding of the words and the art, I think, just hit it.
I love that controlled chaos is a good thing, not a bad thing. It probably helped too that, like, I don't know, Dan, you've got teenagers actually in your home, so you have like a thing to check in there. Lisa, do you, when you're writing a new book where you're dealing with a particular age of kids, do you research like what Dan was talking about, like what is going on in the mindsets? Do you talk to kids? What do you do to prepare for the writing process of a new book?
Yeah, I do all that. And then I do this thing where I kind of go back to, in my mind, the age of the kids and when I was that age. And, I found that it's kind of timeless. The insecurities that the kids have, it's the same ones that I had when I was a kid. I mean, it carries over. And when Dan was talking about, like going to Urban Outfitters and stuff like that, I will do that sort of thing. If I'm doing a book that like has some history to it, I'll actually get like a Sears catalog of the year.
Sears catalog?
Yeah, seriously. You get a Sears catalog from the 70s, and you look at the appliances, and you look at what they're wearing, and you look at all that kind of stuff, and it brings it all back. Yeah. But like what I was trying to do with the Misfits, and the reason why so much of what they're wearing is retro too and things like that, is because I kind of wanted it to be timeless. So the Misfits is contemporary, and yet it seems like it's almost a little bit in the future because of all the weird gadgets and toys that they have to stop crime and do this sort of stuff. And it's also a throwback. It's a throwback to the old caper stories and things like that.
Yeah, I was a big fan of. I was a big fan of that stuff when I was a kid. Like, I was referencing back to old shows like the Mod Squad. And have you seen, I don't know if you've seen like stills of the Mod Squad, like, oh, they're delinquent kids, and you're looking at the cast and you're like, they look like they're in their 30s.
Yeah, no, they were in their 30s. And do you remember the finger pencil or the finger pen thing? So there was they used to advertise this fake finger for sport, but it's for kids. And you can write with it, and you can do things. It was a fake finger. But so, like, I tried to incorporate all those kinds of weird gadgets. Like, there's a stink spray that you spray on someone, and they smell really bad, and then you can track them and stuff like that. So it's like I was also thinking like of all the fun toys that I had, and things like in the back of comic books, they always had all the things that you could buy, X-ray glasses and all that, and incorporate that into the story.
So that's something I wanted to make a point about, because when you think about old James Bond movies, like the idea that, oh, his shoe was a phone, like that.
Yeah.
Like, what? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. But now your cell phone does everything, So the fact that a shoe is a phone these days, I think kids like think about it and they go, that's dumb. Why don't they just use their phone? Like, it's an easy device to put in their pockets. So you really have to, there is this aspect of having to challenge yourself a little bit to say, well, what seems like a spy gadget that doesn't seem unnecessary or out of place or not too corny? And so it's actually a challenge to try to, I don't know, like be a visionary and like try to imagine like, oh, what would spy gadgets be like nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
it's a fresh take. It's a fresh take on the spy genre for kids. Yeah.
exactly. So, in talking about like the Sears catalog and stuff like that, I was thinking about a lot of the toys and gadgets from when I was growing up. And there's this spray that I was thinking of, Silly String. I don't know if
Mhm,
you remember Silly String. You spray it and it goes all over, but they can use it to tie people up.
mhm.
And so I was taking all the fun toys and things and just taking it up a few levels. Like,
Yeah,
hey, what can we do with this?
yeah,
Yeah. And the idea of what is old, what is from the past, when you're writing for kids, for all the kids that are out there who are watching this now, when you guys first went out for your school visit, when you first met back then, you might have been talking to some of the parents of the kids that are
oh
actually
gosh,
watching right
That's true.
now.
True.
that's
Okay.
absolutely
and
true.
and and things that we think of now, like the cell phones that we were talking about, and social media, and the ability to always have a phone around you and to have access to talk to your friends from around the world just in a video, didn't even exist back then.
I know, I
You
know.
know,
Yeah,
so
it's funny that you say that because, and this is probably an old thing in my personal bio that I should update, but like I will say that I created a cartoon show, The Replacements for the Disney Channel. And now I'll go to schools and the teachers come up to me and they're like, I grew up with that show when I was a kid. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should update my bio. Because that's something.
well, that's true. I mean, I think that because your careers have spanned a long period of time, and I think about it all the time when I'm talking to kids about things, about books and stories, to remember that beyond 7 years is ancient history to them, or prehistory, because they weren't there. So you're always having to refresh and think in a different way with a
Right.
new generation that you're writing for. That's
Well, there,
exciting, though.
there is something about that because, Lisa's managed to write about, technology that's in the near future, probably the next, like self-driving cars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We've been trying to figure that out. Still can't figure it out. But
The
these
one in the
kids,
book hasn't crashed yet, but
yeah,
yeah.
these kids, they figured it out. They have this amazing van that takes them wherever they want. They can operate it with their, their computers that are operated on like the rings and things like yeah. So it's I mean, I think that's really the best part of visualizing real good science fiction. I don't want to say this is science fiction, but when you're trying to envision technology and the practical uses, you're always trying to see things that could possibly happen, and then like the thing is that you actually get that information right.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this came true, and so maybe someday there will be kids running rampant with self-driving cars.
You probably will be. And I mean, I did, we're talking about research. I did a lot of research. I mean, there's Olive is this amazing acrobat.
Mhm.
And there's one scene, I won't give it all away, but it involves a helicopter and acrobatics in the sky. And so I had to look up, okay, when a helicopter takes off, how long does it take before it's this many feet in the air, and what would happen if somebody fell? I mean, all of that stuff. So it's a melding of imagination and the future and reality today.
Yeah, and I just loved all of the like we talked about before, the action of it that just keeps propelling the story forward. I'm excited that it's a series, and I'm assuming that you're already working on the second book, maybe. But I am really hoping, Lisa, because you've already mentioned it. I think battling ballerinas, they are not necessarily heroes, but those could be the greatest supervillains in the world, or the hench
I was just
people
thinking
of
that. That's awesome.
supervillains. So
Yeah, yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, well, that would have to be book 3 because I'm finishing up book 2 already.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, Dan started kind of quasi working.
Just waiting to find out.
We'll
And then
talk about it on our book tour.
Yeah.
and the publisher says, "You have these sketches ready by last week." Like,
Well, you know what? The thing is, like with book 2, I mean, I was so thrilled with Dan's illustrations of book 1, and book 2 is it's very twisty, and there's a lot of twists and turns. It's a lot of stuff going on, and I started to get lazy. Dan's not going to want to hear this.
why are we saying this? Why are we saying this out loud?
I started writing, and it's like, oh, how am I going to write this? And I said, I will lean on Dan's illustrations. I will.
No, that's not a bad thing, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, but yeah, I mean, so like there are parts in the book, Dan, that you'll see that says, Dan, do this, and because it's so complicated, it's like you're going to have to do a graph and a map and a this and that with arrows, because visually, I think people are going to need to follow what's happening.
Okay, maybe we'll have to discuss.
Well, so that brings up a good point, which I'm sort of interested in finding out is. Because this is sort of a go back and forth, Lisa, you've written a story, you've got a draft of a story that then goes to Dan, and Dan, you illustrate. Do you then look at those illustrations and do you change aspects of the story, Lisa, based off of the artwork? Or is there another draft that happens after that? Or is the illustrations are just coming in with the draft that you have created?
No, I mean, Dan's stuff's really solid. No, there hasn't. I mean, no, I don't think we ever have we, Dan?
Well, I mean, with a book this robust, like if I ended up changing something, like it just creates ripples, So like it might have her, I interpret the text the way it should be, and like I give my little insights to just a little bit of extra detail, but I don't infringe on her writing,
Yeah.
Like I don't want to take it to that level. But yeah, I mean, I think we just lean on each other's strengths, and we understand, that we trust the other person to do the thing. I mean, I wholeheartedly, I understand that this is Lisa's series, and I'm playing more of a supporting role to try to make it a stronger book. And so, fingers crossed that it really connects with kids and it takes off.
Well, it is. Oh, go. Sorry, Lisa. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's like it's what Dan said about the ripples. That's a good way to put it, because there are so many things in the book leading up to the final scenes that everything's in place. Some of the details that you might think are throwaway really come into play at the end, and it's all set up.
Yeah, Lisa, you have an ability in all of your books to connect to the emotional life of middle graders in a way that really keeps them engaged in the story, whether it be superhero stories or action-oriented stories like this, or personal stories about going back to meet your grandfather. I mean, or school situations. Why is it important for you to be able to write those kind of stories for kids? Because you're really a master at it.
Thank you. I think I always go back to middle grade, like when I'm talking to people and I ask them about their childhood. Some people will talk about when they're really little, some will talk about high school, but when I think about my childhood, I think about middle grade. I mean, that's my go-to place. It's where I remember being 10 years old, 11 years old, and thinking, this is it. This is it. I know everything. And this is, I mean, it doesn't get better than this. And well, maybe that's true. I don't know, but I don't know. I just have a soft spot in my heart for middle grade. I think that when you're in middle grade, you're so open to things. You're not jaded. You're curious. You have questions. You're wondering what's going to happen. You're excited about things. And it's different. And then you hit high school, and life changes.
Oh, life changes. It sure does. Absolutely. So with both of you having these award-winning books that you wrote that touched so many people and got lots of feedback from people, I suppose you already had books that you were working on, but was there a feeling like, was there pressure after that to like, what is the next book going to be, or were those books already written, so there wasn't that feeling of pressure about what am I going to do next?
You mean like from our previous, like, okay, so
From
like,
the big win, from the big wins. You
oh,
both
okay,
had big wins recently for two
okay.
very special books.
So when I was writing, oh, I can do that. I can.
We see it.
I'm so talented. When I was writing, when Maisie came out, I was already working on the Misfits, or I had started that.
Okay.
So, and it was actually great. I mean, I love Maisie, but Maisie's contemporary and historical fiction, and there's a lot going on there, and I wanted something completely different. And so the Misfits is kind of the opposite of Maisie. I mean, I love them both, but they're very different books.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience, you know, after, and Lisa can attest, but after winning the Caldecott medal, I had this existential crisis, right? Everyone always thinks, oh, you won this major literary award, like you have no problems. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, how do I top this? Like, where do I go from here? Because I think in every creative soul, there's this desire to want to improve on your previous work. You want to know that you're improving, right? And so, you know, you get into this situation, fortunate or unfortunate, where, you know, there's this mountain that you've been saying like, oh, I can't wait to reach the summit. I hope I reach the summit, right? And then you get to the summit and then you look around and you say, well, this is great, but where do I go from here? And then you just kind of ask yourself like, well, how can I feel this joy ever again, right? And it's just this horrible existential crisis. Like, why am I writing? Like, why am I writing this? And one of the best pieces of advice, I remember I looked out to some of my friends, and one of the best pieces of advice I got was from this great author friend of mine, Bruce Cobin. And Bruce sat me down and he said, well, first of all, congratulations. You should really savor this. This is a wonderful accolade. And he said, no, I'm going to tell you something. You know, William Shakespeare wrote some great stuff. You know, he wrote Othello, he wrote, you know, Macbeth, he wrote Romeo and Juliet, but he also wrote a lot of crap in between. And the thing is that you win some, you lose some, but you just keep going and you're never going to bat 1,000. And that was a tremendous relief to me, right? And so it took me, boy, I'll probably say it took me a few years to finally shake off the insecurities and doubt about winning an award like that, because it's definitely something, it's such a big award, you feel like you have to live up to it, right?
Well,
And you know, I think for me on a personal level, I kept asking myself like, well, can I repeat a book of this quality? And it wasn't until I wrote After the Fall where, you know, I felt like, oh yeah, I actually think this is better than Beagle, right? It's my personal favorite, right? And then you fast forward, you know, another, you know, 9 years, and then you won a National Book Award, or you're a finalist for the National Book Award. And I remember being at the banquet and all the finalists, they were so nervous. They were so nervous, like, oh my gosh, I can't eat. I can't sleep. And meanwhile, I'm at the banquet. I'm just like eating food. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait. And I remember like some people were like, how can you eat in a time like this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think what happened was that I just had this calm of saying like, this award's not going to define me. Like, I've already won a major literary award. Like, I'm just happy to be a finalist, right? So there is this, eventually you get to this place where, you know, you realize it's like, oh my gosh, 20 years into this business, I'm just grateful people still care about the stuff that I write. I don't necessarily want to say that ageism is a thing. I don't even know if it is. I mean, for the audience, maybe it's more pertinent in like the YA market where age is a factor into the content that people want to read. Like, I want to read a romance novel from this old guy, right? But there is a part of you where you're watching the industry, the people that you worked with all these years, they're starting to retire. You're getting a younger generation of editors and folks like that, and they probably have their different take on the world. And then you have to stop and you're writing and you're looking and seeing what's out there, and you're like, my voice doesn't seem to be quite in sync with all that work that's out there right now. Like, do I still know how to write for this audience? You know, so I think that's a different factor. It's less about following up with awards that you've won, and it's more about like, can I evolve with the times to make sure that what I'm writing will still resonate with kids today? You know, so you always have to kind of continue to grow, because if you don't, you're going to be writing about, like, oh, I remember, back when I was watching TV on an old cathode tube, and like, it just sounds dated. So you have to constantly, maintain this understanding of the world in order to still be, I don't want to say relevant, but not out of touch.
Yeah. Lisa, go ahead.
I add that so the day that Dan won the Caldecott, we went out to lunch. Well, we were always going out to lunch. We went out to lunch. He was the most depressed that I had ever. He was such a bummer. I brought the book to lunch. I was like, yeah, and he was just like, oh, my life is over. And I remember saying to him, well, I can't say exactly what I said to him because there's some words, but it was like, stop it. You won the Caldecott. Enjoy this. I remember there was a moment where Dan went, I won the Caldecott.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was just like he was so different. I told our server, she gave us a free dessert. I'm like,
that was great. Yeah.
Like, this guy won the Caldecott. I mean, so I'm glad you got out of your depression, Dan, because
probably one of the rare cases of just like, hey, just won the Caldecott. Like, oh, wrong course.
You were so depressed.
I want to ask you both as we get to the end here, for the kids that are out there listening to your stories and your experiences, what is because they're all going through many of the things that you talked about, but on their own scale, on their own level. Frustration, maybe after they had a big achievement that they're going to have to live up to it, or maybe they're the friend of an achiever and they're not achieving in that way, which is a whole other thing.
Right.
And you both talk so eloquently about that experience of being a young person and going through that. What advice would you give to kids that are out there on all these different levels about creating and not giving up on creativity?
So I'm going to harken back to the Misfits. And the thing is that each one of these kids thought that they were losers. They felt awkward and alone. And when they came together, their trainers from this super secret agency, like Olive, she always worried. She worries a lot and she's afraid of things. And they're like, no, we don't want people who are super courageous. We want people who worry and are fearful, because that makes you stronger. And so I would say to take the things that concern you about yourself and turn it around and say, what can I do with this? Like, for example, for myself, I was that kid who was always sitting in a corner reading books and imagining things. And it's like, well, what can I do with that? Well, I can become an author. Although it took me a long time to figure it out. I wish I had started thinking that way when I was younger.
Yeah, when you look at any adult who seems to appear as if they've got it all figured out, I have news for every kid out there. No adult has anything figured it out, right? Like, here I am. I've been an adult for a number of years. I still don't know how to do my taxes, things like that. Oh. There's something that will always be just beyond your realm of comprehension. There'll always be things that will surprise you. And I promise, any kid who has any feelings of self-doubt or insecurity, you are not alone. Every human being on earth has experienced that. They just mask it better than everybody else. And, life really isn't a race. It's just your own personal journey, and you just make the most of it and try to, figure out who you are as a person. I think that really is the most important part of just living, is to know who you are and to learn to like yourself and accept, the good and bad of yourself, and just embrace it. Just embrace yourself. It sounds really corny and really zen, but it really is the key to happiness to life.
Yeah. The powerful message for me and the Misfits, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be a powerful message book. It's going to be an action adventure book. But the powerful message is we all have our individual skill sets. And it's only when you have that powerful group of friends around you that have their own skill sets that balance you out and make you, even stronger together than separate. And here we have this great collaboration of two wonderful misfits that I love so much. We have the storyteller and the visionary, and together you have created this excellent, wonderful book to take kids on another adventure. When can we expect the second book?
I don't know.
It's already out. It's been out for 1 week. I want to know when the next book is out.
Is it supposed to be this year or next year?
I think it's next year. I don't know. I've not finished yet, but I will be finished soon. But,
and meanwhile, the publishers is like, can we get some cover sketches? And I'm like, I don't even know what the book's about. Like, so no, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be soon. It'll be soon. Probably not this year, but maybe early next year. I don't know for sure.
Probably. I think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, I'm super excited. Lisa, we know what you're working on because you're working on book 2 right now.
Yeah.
And Dan, you have, how many more books are coming out this year?
Oh, this year, let's see. I have 2 picture books. I have another Detective Duck coming out this year, or maybe next year.
Yeah, fall. I think it's fall. I think it's.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. And then, oh boy, like right now I'm working. 2025 is going to be my big packed loaded year. I'm anticipating. I think about 7 to 10 books.
Yeah.
I don't know how I ended up here.
But you are going to prioritize your work so that when you
finally turn it in,
that will come.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to have to get an extra room for my house just to house my Dan Santat library. So.
I know. Yeah. Slow down.
It is such a joy to speak with you both, and I thank you. We're super excited because we're going to be taking you out to different schools, and you're going out on a tour. Is your tour all around the country, or is it just locally?
All over. They're sending us. Well, so it's being broken up into 2 bits. So the first one, they're sending us out to all the cold places. We're going to places like St. Paul, Minnesota, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Tennessee, North Carolina. Second stint will be parts of LA, the Bay Area, Denver, and
Texas,
Houston.
Austin.
Yeah.
Austin.
We'll be busy. We'll be busy in the next month.
Yeah. And then there's like the LA Times book festival.
Yeah. That's green room in the business.
Well, that's good to know for
things too. Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys will be at the LA Times Book Festival, which happens in April, then everybody who's watching this, if you want to go with your family to be able to visit at USC and meet them in person, you have that opportunity in the future. And I'm sure there will be lots of pastry eating on this tour as you're going around. Pastries being a major part of
trying to trim down LA, trying to trim down for the half marathon coming up in a couple of weeks.
This may be an interesting thing while you're on tour together. One eating for the other person so that they can run. So.
Good. Trying to be good. Yeah.
All right. Thank you both so much. We're so happy to see you, and we wish you lots of luck on your tour. And kids, you cannot wait to read this book, which is out and available at Children's Book World. And we're going to have an event with Lisa and Dan on Saturday, January 20th at 12:30 at our store, Children's Book World in Los Angeles. And we hope to see you there. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.